Argentina, from different parts of the country, which is really very, very nice. Welcome to my home in the northwestern part of London. This is where we're meeting. If you have a cuppa with you, a brew, that's going to be great. I have mine here, so just feel free to feel at home, because the intention of this talk is actually to be one among friends. Thank you, FAAPI, for giving me the platform to share my ideas with you all. And once again, I think that this is going to be a very exciting session in many different ways. I hope that you feel the same about it. One of the things that I have to say at the very beginning, and this is probably a disclaimer, is that I am not going to be talking about how to use humor in the classroom. That's not going to be the topic of the conversation tonight. We can talk about that in a later probably session. And the reason I am flagging this up now is because I received a couple of emails saying, oh, that's great that you're going to be talking about using humor in the classroom. And the focus is a little bit different, is how to teach humor and how to get to grips with teaching humor, which apparently is one of the hardest things to teach in ELT. We're going to see why that's the case. And for me to get started, I think it's important to tell you a very personal story. It was about a long time ago. I was in a social gathering, and I could see people laughing their hearts out, constantly laughing at something that to me was completely senseless. So I sort of felt a kind of socially awkward, because everybody was enjoying themselves, laughing, and I was just standing in a corner, sort of feeling sorry for myself. I had to, in a way, share these feelings with a colleague of mine. And she said to me, the problem is that you are humor incompetent. And she stopped. And it was a 30-second pause that to me looked like it was an eternity. And in those 30 seconds after she uttered the words, "You are humor incompetent," I felt really, really miserable. And she realized that I wasn't having a good time. And she said, "You can laugh, I'm only joking." So this is in a way the title of the conversation tonight. And I'm going to share with you some of my experiences. And it's really, really very encouraging that some of you are actually using humor in your lessons as a way of going into the language. So for example, this is what we had at the minute. You were invited to take part in a poll. And the question was, do you teach humor in your lessons? It's really encouraging that 46% of you are really using humor as a way of going into the nuances of English. And it doesn't surprise me at all that the majority are not using humor, and there are many different reasons for that. But in other parts of the world, for example, the no normally translates into "I can't be bothered." And the reason for that is because teachers feel that they are not really very much equipped with the necessary tools in order to be able to teach humor. So this is more or less the tone of the conversation tonight. And I am going to be talking about three different things. And these three topics are in a way ideas that emerged from talking to colleagues, from observing lessons, and from my own reflections. It will be really, really great to hear from those of you who are using Humour, because I'm very, very much interested about your experience and how you feel in relation to the topic. And more importantly, how your students perceive Humour, because I think that that's the most important part of all. We're going to start off with this very hurtful comment that I received a long time ago, being humor incompetent. But we're going to flip it, and we're going to say that one of the main things that we need to bear in mind is humor competence. And what do we really mean by humor competence? Well, humor competence is, in a way, the ability to take the students into this journey of discovering the different meanings of the language. And one of those elements has to do with sensitization. I will come back to this topic in a moment, but I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for you to try to solve these two problems, these two questions. I think that these are very, very powerful ways of starting a lesson. We can use them as starters or as warm-ups. But at the same time, I believe that they have a potential to get students thinking. So if you already know the answers to these questions, you're a genius. And I believe you are, because it took me a long, long time to find the answers to these two questions. What time did a man go to the dentist? 2:30. Some people will go, oh, that's not really funny, right? If that's you, probably it means that you are humor incompetent. But the answer to the second one, right, is actually a very sweet one. And this is the answer. Right? Okay, what can we see here? There are two elements that come to mind straight away. First of all, what we can notice very easily is that there is an element of incongruity. And I believe this is important when we are talking about humor, that humor is based in this particular concept, incongruity. And the way we understand incongruity is that something doesn't really follow a logical progression, that there is a break. And here the break is phonology, the first question, what time did the man go to the dentist? And in the second one, we have an incongruity in lexis. So I think that this is probably a very, very good way to sensitize students to the fact that there are many different interpretations within the language. So we can use, for example, grammar, vocabulary, and phonology incongruities in order to start a lesson with the intention that the students develop this awareness. And I think this is taking me on to the second main element of the talk tonight, language awareness. What do we understand by language awareness? Well, most of us will probably be very keen on this topic and say, well, language awareness is the ability to know exactly when language is used in order to respond to a particular communicative situation, and we can elaborate probably the concept of language awareness. But when we talk about humor, we're talking about a little bit different, right? We're talking about subtexts. So for example, look at the examples on your screen, and you're going to see what I mean by subtexts. In English, and in particular, British English, there are meanings which are implied. And this is a way of communicating something in a very oblique manner in order to produce some understatement, right? I really love the one that says, look, let's just forget it, right? What it really means, the person saying that is, okay, I will remember what you did to me until the day I die, right? So subtexts are really very, very important. And within British English, I believe it's one of the most common features of the language. One of the ways in which we can enhance the language awareness of our students is through the design of tasks with a focus on this double-edged sense of language. Moving from the literal meaning, the denotation, towards the connotation, in other words, the implied meaning of the speaker. And I think it's a very good way of doing this is through the use of metaphors and the use of idioms. Why? Because when we present idioms, for example, there is instantly an opportunity to think about the connotation, the intended meaning that goes beyond the level of the sentence. I really like, for example, the one that says, I might check it out. Every time I send an email to a colleague of mine and I say, please, can you do this? The answer is, yes, I'll check it out. When she says that, I know that she is meaning something completely different, right? So in a way, this is what we call language awareness within this humor competence development. There is something else, and I believe this is the stepping up a level, which I call the paratextual features. In other words, the socio-cultural knowledge that comes with the use of the language. And it's going to be a little bit complex here, but let me get this very, let's say, graphic. There is a website there, and by the way, you will be able to download this presentation at the end. And there is a video clip that illustrates what I'm talking about. There are at least 8 different humorous scripts in English. And the most important one, I believe, is irony. Now, there are many others, right? And I believe that you will find this type of humorous scripts everywhere you go. And I think that irony is probably the most widely used, in the sense that sometimes native speakers will say something with a very, very straight face, showing no emotions at all, and trying to convey a message that is really very, very funny in their own terms, but for the outsiders might be probably very difficult to understand, or sometimes it can be taken the other way. It can be really annoying, it can be really insulting, or it can be really demeaning. Depending on our cultural background and our mental schemas, we are bound to interpret irony in different ways. And I will show you in a minute what I mean. So, humorous scripts are, let's say, a variety of different uses of the language. In this case, we are using, obviously, because of the limitations of Zoom, written language. But there are many examples of stand-up comedians, just to name one, and probably jokes that one might hear television, that if you're not really in tune with the socio-cultural background, you may be left sort of thinking, what is this all about? We're going to see some examples. We say that incongruity is the most important thing. And the way in which we can develop this part of the language is through a discussion of the cultural differences. Why? Because what makes us laugh in our cultural setting is completely different to what, for example, British speakers, in this case, find funny. There are certain things which are not funny at all for us, and it works the other way around as well. And I think this is a very important point to discuss with our students at some point. What makes us laugh? And from that basis, we can sort of create a very, very good discussion about why we find British humor a little bit challenging. The second task that I found very useful is the focus on phonology and the use of different tones. Why? Because using the wrong tones conveys the opposite meaning. And I think phonology has this very, very marked feature of making messages really, really challenging. And sometimes if we don't pick the right tone, we might misinterpret the message. So the focus on phonology and the use of tones, I believe, is a necessary thing for us to work on. We also mentioned the focus on syntactic structures and lexical units and how they can mean different things according to different contexts. And we have a focus on body language. I think that body language is certainly something that we need to explore a little bit more. I believe that in the context of face-to-face interaction, we're not really very keen on focusing on body language. And I think when teaching humor, this is a key feature. So I was going to show you an example. Actually, I've got many, but if you look at the girl wearing the t-shirt, this is actually something that is a fashion in these times of the pandemic in London. Many teenagers are using that particular t-shirt because they want to say something. And the message there is very clear. Please stay away from me, 2 meters distance, because that's social distancing. I am not telling you directly that you need to be a little bit further away from me, but if you read what my t-shirt says, then you'll get the message. Many people got offended because of that, simply because they couldn't understand the message. I'm not going to talk about the barbecue because probably that's very, very obvious. And because of the time, I need to move on. Now, developing humor competence, I believe there are 6 main components. First of all, language sensitization. I believe that it's a matter of telling the students that there is this element of incongruity. The second point is language awareness and the focus on subtexts. There are things that are implied that go beyond the literal meaning. The next point to take into consideration is the paratextual features or the socio-cultural knowledge in order to make sense of what the speakers are actually saying. The next point is this emphasis on cross-cultural differences and discussing what makes us laugh. Probably that's going to be a very good starting point. Then it's the emphasis on receptive skills, because we don't really want at this stage our students to use jokes in English, but we want them to understand and more than that, identify when humor is taking place. And finally, I think that the use of multimedia resources with a combination of prints and video clips are really a very good way of focusing, especially on the use of body language. And finally, I think it's very, very important not to stereotype. Very quickly, I am going to show you probably a book that you are familiar with. These are the series of How to Be British. I love the books. There are 3 of them, but I need to use them with care, simply because they tend to stereotype a particular group of people, and that's not really a very good thing. So there are some resources that I would like to share with you. If you want to go into the depth of the British way of life and to understand the way in which humor works, Watching the English by Kate Fox is an excellent resource. You're going to be really, really entertained about the different situations that she describes in terms of opportunities for humor. There are other resources there for you, and there is one in particular which contains very, very good references. The one by Tung Kai is available online, and although it's a very interesting research paper, the references are all linked to specific humorous situations, most of them taken from YouTube. So, thank you very much. I probably want to say quite a lot more, and there is a lot more to say. So thank you, FAAPI, for giving me the opportunity to share this 20 minutes with you all. Thank you, wherever you are in Argentina. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you all. There is a QR code there if you want to download the presentation, and there will be some additional resources available as well. Now, if you want to continue this conversation, there is a piece of homework, right? And I would be very much interested to hear from you in relation to your views about this video clip, right? My take on this is that there will be many different opinions, and if you want to share your views with me, please do so. That's my email address, and again, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mario. On behalf of everyone at FAAPI here, we want to thank you again for sharing all these insights into teaching humor in the ELT classroom. Thank you everyone for attending, and I'm sure that we have gained some insights into humor, and that teaching humor is a serious matter, all right? So I want to tell you everything. Please follow us on our social networks. We will be uploading a recorded version of this session on the YouTube channel, and stay tuned for our next event next Friday. We have a surprise for you next Friday, so make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook to find out. Okay, once again, Mario, thank you for your generosity and sharing this session with us.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, so bye everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.